Hello and welcome to Cricket8 Podcast. I'm Megha. Joining me here is Mash, and today we're going to be discussing about how the squads stack up ahead of the Champions Trophy, what their preparations have been like, what their win-loss ratios have been like, and what the squads exactly look like. Mash, first things first. India and Pakistan are yet to declare their squads, but you had a pretty strong opinion on India that you were talking about in the group. Shall we shed light on the same? You're already smiling.
I was only because I was hoping I was going to get away with it. so, so,
You can
okay,
still twist it.
let's get the rage comments out of the way straight away. So what I said in the private chat before we started was I said, are India the most overrated team in international cricket? Now, obviously, people are going to be like, this Mash is always saying stuff like this. He's always trying to get a rise out of people. But the reason why I was thinking it was because given, when I say overrated, I want to clarify. I mean overrated relative to column inches. So it's fair to say that India, Australia, England get the most column inches written about them
Yeah.
when it comes to the game of cricket. But I was just looking at India thinking, they don't win enough to warrant the amount of conversation that goes on about them. That doesn't mean they're not a good team. I'm not saying they're not a good team. I'm just saying that they're not a champion side, and they should win more competitions given the level of investment, interest, noise that goes around the side. Now, obviously, in the last 24 hours or so, in fact, maybe 48, there seems to be a lot being written about, and players can't take this person with them, and this has to stop now, and they can't
Yeah.
travel to games like X, Y. Like, so clearly, it feels like Indian cricket is going through some kind of massive soul-searching recriminations after the defeat to New Zealand, and now the defeat to
Australia.
Australia in the Border Gavaskar Trophy. And I guess in a weird way, even though I never meant it like that in the comments, I'm now going to say that what I meant by that statement is, do India need to win the Champions Trophy? Because in a roundabout way, that's effectively what I'm getting at. Because yes, they haven't named their squad, and so I guess we're going to look at the squads. Let's start with India. Yes, they haven't named their squad yet, but coming off the back of two, I was about to say poor, but poor's the wrong word. Coming off the back of, let's just say, of two defeats. Coming off the back of
Hmm.
two test series defeats, how important is let's not put pressure on them and say winning. How important is it that they at least get to the final?
Like they did last time around.
Yeah,
Now, the
like how,
question.
yeah.
Hmm. Now, obviously, it happened in 2017. It's been a while since Champions Trophy happened, since anybody was serious about this tournament being staged. But aren't we contributing to what we just accused Indian team or the media of? Because Indian team is or the BCCI is yet to declare the squad, and here we are starting with India. When there are various other teams that have already declared their squads. But anyway, because they're very popular, the conversations around them garner further conversations. That's why the media is very interested in the Indian team. And it's not just about the Indian media, it's about media in England, Australia, and West Indies as well. Now, again, what India need to do. So, are you talking about the champions? Are you talking about the ICC trophies when you mentioned that India are overrated? Because let's admit it, this time around they wouldn't be featuring in the WTC finals, but otherwise, now with Australia also getting into their second WTC finals, it's only India who have done it before.
Mm.
Third edition, first two editions, India made it to the finals. So the test format, they've been fairly consistent. And when it came to grabbing the test mace, they were fairly consistently doing that as well. Now, in the last few years as well, now Champions Trophy, of course, finalist in 2017, then T20 World Cup, finally managing to lift an ICC trophy, won the Asia Cup, made it to the finals of the World Cup, looked absolutely dominant throughout that campaign. So they've been doing reasonably well. So does this argument hold still? I understand the trade-off hasn't. The trade-off has been pretty interesting because while for 12 years they were absolutely dominant at home and even away, barring say South Africa, where they wouldn't win series no matter what, but defeated Australia twice at home for a decade. In fact, kept them away from the Border Gavaskar Trophy. So they were fairly consistent in Test until recently when they lost back to back against New Zealand and Australia. And even if we again not head to those two series, before that, the manner in which they defeated Bangladesh, of course, Bangladesh is not Australia, but they were pretty dominant against Pakistan in their own conditions at home. And then they were on a high. And India, from a test that looked to be heading towards a draw, they sprinkled life into it and then won it. So, fairly consistent overall, but your arguments when it comes purely to the performance.
Yeah, just in terms of, okay, so the best example then is to use is just Australia. Everyone
Yeah.
accepts that Australia are a champion side because when it comes to actually winning things,
Hmm.
they win. And I'm not even going to get into this. I'm not even going to even count Border Gavaskar because it's a bilateral series. But we're
Yeah.
talking about World Test Championships, World Cups. They find a way to win and get over the line. And so it's not for me to denigrate and not say that India aren't a good team. But when the numbers are pulled, when all is said and done. So, for example, West Indies are a bad team, but they still have 2 world titles
Yeah.
in the last 10 or so years, right? And they're a bad team, right? But I think India only have 2 world titles in the last 10 years or so as well. So that's why I'm saying more we are, and you're right, we are contributing to that noise. But in the context of looking ahead to the Champions Trophy, and in the context of two underwhelming defeats in
Yeah.
a test series, they are one of a few teams who need a strong Champions Trophy. Like Australia could not win Champions Trophy, and I don't think anyone really cares because they're going to the World Chess Championship final. Do you see what I
Yeah.
mean? So there's a few teams that come in. South Africa could not win the Champions Trophy, and I don't think they'd care because they're also going to the World Test Championship. But obviously they'd care, but I don't think it's a big, huge priority for them. So I have India in a pool, and this is probably a nice segue into looking at everyone else. I have India in a pool of teams. I'm like, they probably need a strong Champions Trophy here.
Hmm. More so because of what happened recently, and more so
Yeah,
because of the rumors that have been floating around. If India managed to lift the Champions Trophy, all of these conversations, all of these restrictions that have been put in place, they'd be put to rest.
yeah.
In the meanwhile, there's a question which says, I don't know how you pronounce your name, Mugloo. What's your favorite template for the ODI format? And considering how little this format has been played in the
Mm.
last year, as compared to obviously the previous year where the World Cup was to happen. So almost double the number of ODIs were played. The template, I think, from one ICC tournament to the other probably keeps changing. But what would be your ideal template, considering the conditions again?
And by template, I think Mugloo's talking about the construction of the 11, right?
Yeah, and their
Right.
approach as well, I think.
Mm. For India or for a team in general? Because I might just say in general.
Teams in general,
Yeah, I'm going to go. So
considering
first,
that it is to happen in Pakistan and
yeah, so I think in
UAE.
general, I mean, considering like the majority of the tournaments happening in Pakistan, it's going to be very interesting to. I think it's hard because the natural inclination is to assume, okay, so the pitches are going to be turners and it's going to be
Hmm.
low, it's going to be slow. But then we had a World Cup in India, and it wasn't necessarily like that.
Yeah,
If you see what I mean, it wasn't dominated by spin, so to speak. So, and I think when it's an ICC tournament, the pitches are supposed to be, generally speaking, a bit truer
hmm.
to make for a more um, even competition, so to speak. So I I find it hard to know what to say for this because West Indies are about to play Pakistan in Multan in a 2-match test
Yeah,
series, but we know that those pitches are going to be raging turners. But I don't expect the pitches for the Champions Trophy to be raging turners. So I think teams should consider going into the World Cup. Yes, you're going to need some spinners, at least 2, you would imagine, for most of the sides that play in that tournament. But I wouldn't be overthinking how much spin you need, and I would still be looking at the general balance of a good side. So generally, that means for a Pakistan slash
Hmm.
Dubai tournament, two pacers, two spinners, and a very good all round. No, sorry, mm, two pacers, two spinners, one very good all rounder, and then a sixth bowler who's probably in your top five. But not every team has that construction.
Yeah.
Do you, not, not
That's a
first and foremost,
dream
not
scenario.
every team
A
has
very
a
good
very
all
good
rounder.
all rounder. So that already eliminates half of the teams in the tournament to begin with. So, but that would be the perfect construction for my ODI side.
Hmm. There's a comment by AJ, and because of the fair representation of the Indian fans in the comment section, we have to also talk about the Indian domestic cricket. He says Karun Nair and Vijay Hazare Trophy 24-25 has been in stellar form, and he's also cited the scores. There was a time in between where he did not get out, and his average as well is absolutely mammoth because he's been churning out the century, leading with Harba, has been in phenomenal form. When we talk about Karun Nair, one obviously inevitably goes back to his triple century, only the second triple centurion for India, and after that didn't get a serious look in. More so because India shifted to five bowler strategy, and other players started getting opportunities and pouncing on those. It's been an interesting story. There was a while in between when he did not even have a side in Ranji Trophy in domestic cricket in India, and now he's back and he's doing really well. Maybe not immediately, but sometime down the line, maybe for the England series, the Test series, he might just feature. Mash, your thoughts on it, and then we'd move on to the squats that we set out to do, to dissect the squats. We're yet to touch upon it.
Yeah.
Your
This is what.
recollections of Karun Nair.
Yeah. Well, you, the raw numbers itself speak for themselves, right?
Yeah.
And if you're, and this is the thing though, because we're jumping from formats, right? India have just come off what, two Test series, and now it's a Champions Trophy. And again, it's
Mm.
just about how much of that, how much of the noise around the tests will mess with their thought processes
Mm.
for the Champions Trophy. And what I mean by that, Mega, is they should already have known ages ago what they were going to do for the Champions Trophy. The test should be irrelevant, but I feel like, and I could be completely wrong, but I feel like the ramifications coming out of the test series is going to affect how they go about their
Yeah.
construction with it. But it shouldn't. It's a completely different format. So if we're talking just pure numbers, yeah, he should get a look in. And if we're talking
Mm.
about the fact that there's some doubts about certain players and so on and so forth, but then I just put it to you simply like this. Let's just use Rohit and Virat just for argument's sake, right? It's not about those two, but let's just use them for argument's sake. If the plan before Border Gavaskar was always to go to the Champions Trophy with Rohit and Virat, then you go to the Champions Trophy with Rohit and Virat. What happened in
Yeah.
Border Gavaskar should be absolutely irrelevant. But I just don't know where the think tank is at. Will they go with, we already had a plan, so we're going to follow our plan? Or will they go with knee-jerk reaction, people want answers, so let's bring in some players who are new and fresh because we need to, like you said, I don't know which way they're going to go.
Mm. I think, and I do not have any sources, that had India been heading in that direction in the Champions Trophy, the direction without Rohit and Virat, internet would have gone on meltdown already.
Mm.
So it's all quiet, it's all fine. So apparently, whatever India had decided ahead of the Border Gavaskar Trophy, that is going to happen without any dramatic changes, of course. There might be a change or two here and there. Now, probably, potentially, we can take two teams at a time. And Bharat says, in worst case scenario, if Ayub for Pakistan and Bumrah for India miss out on the tournament, will it increase the chance for New Zealand entering the semis and put extra pressure on the other two? Now, this is very interesting because Ayub, of course, has been in phenomenal form, particularly
Mm.
in this format. He has been churning out centuries, and then that injury happened. It looks highly unlikely because he couldn't feature anymore in that game and had to be flown out. So it looks highly unlikely that he'd feature. About Bumrah, we are still not clear. There's no official word on what exactly is the nature of the injury. And again, a lot of rumors doing rounds. Like, anything and everything to do with the Indian cricket at the moment, Bumrah himself had to clarify that he was okay. He did not need bed rest. How important are these two players to their teams, and what role their absence could play? And overall, let's also have a look at the two squads. Of course, we do not have the two squads, but our speculations around what their squads could be like.
So I think it's fair enough to say that if India don't have Bumrah, they can't win. I think that's fair enough to say, because not just because of who Jasprit Bumrah is, but because of the form he was displaying, prior to the injury, to take somebody out of that kind of world-class bracket, you need two players to replace Jasprit Bumrah. You can't just go like for like. So I think if India lose him, I don't see how they win. Famous last words. Everyone timestamp that and come back to me when India win the tournament. But and I think based on my Pakistani friends who I've spoken to recently with regards to Saeem Ayub, I think they see Saeem Ayub in a similar kind of way. Not that, if he's not about it, Pakistan can't win, but they realize that without him, their chances to win decrease significantly. I don't know if I'd go as far as saying, that definitely removes Pakistan and India out of the reckoning for who can win or shape up nicely for this tournament, but it would make for how like in some tournaments you're like, right, the home team has an advantage, right? So we just had the T20 World Cup in the Caribbean. Prior to that World Cup, nobody would have said, the West Indies have a chance. But because it was in the Caribbean, we were suddenly elevated as being one of the outsiders to possibly win the tournament. So because it's in Asia, you naturally have to talk up Pakistan. You naturally have to talk up India, and to a smaller extent, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and Afghanistan, right? But if we're going to say that without those two players, Pakistan and India are significantly weakened, it makes this tournament so wide open. I don't think there's a favourite. I actually genuinely don't think there's a favourite in this tournament. And do you know what? You've kind of hinted at it as well. Why, Megha? Because this format of the game isn't played often enough anymore.
Yeah.
So you can't
What do you
even
make
like
out of the form meter?
Yeah, like you can't even be like, and in recent times XYZ's been doing this. Like, you don't really have much to really go on and get your hands into and say, yeah, this is the form side. So I want to believe it's a genuinely open tournament.
Indeed. Time for a quick break. We'd be right back to discuss about other teams, finally.
Come to cricket8.com for the best scorecards with visual representation of who is winning at any moment, plus live footage from some matches as well. You can also see what the market is thinking. There is simply no place to follow this sport live like cricket8.com.
All right.
Yeah, so we're
let's
scroll for these teams, yeah?
Yeah. Let's begin by taking Rahul's question, and then probably we can direct the conversation to how Bangladesh at the moment are looking. He's asking how Bangladesh made it ahead of Sri Lanka and West Indies. West Indies did not qualify for the World Cup, which automatically meant that they would not make it to the Champions Trophy, that is 2023 ODI World Cup. And Sri Lanka, again, did not rank as well as Bangladesh did at that tournament. They massively struggled. So Bangladesh finished ahead of them and hence qualified. And that's why we all obviously are also seeing Afghanistan and Bangladesh in the Champions Trophy and not the two teams that you talked about. Now, MASH, yes, the squads.
Yeah, so we'll go with Bangladesh first. And we'll kind of do it as a as a snapshot look at these squads rather than going too much in depth. But Megha, I would essentially say that before the break, I said, it's in Asia, so you have to assume the Asian teams have a slight bit more of an advantage than others. But I don't think I put Bangladesh in that same category. I like their bowling attack. I've just seen them in the Caribbean. West Indies beat them 3-0 at the back end of 2024. But I didn't see enough from Bangladesh's batting for me to suggest that they can make any serious headway in this tournament. I think they've got a nice balanced bowling attack to some extent, but I don't feel that their batters have enough in them to either put up the big enough totals for their bowlers to defend or chase down strong totals. So I am actually ruling Bangladesh out of being a strong contender.
And the top order collapse is something that has been kind of a refrain across formats, and it's just that the middle order, the low order steps up. That it still looks respectable. Otherwise, Bangladesh have been struggling massively. They wanted to call on the experience of Shakib Al Hasan, Tamim Iqbal. Tamim Iqbal announced his retirement, refused to come back, and Shakib, obviously, because of the bowling report, his bowling action being reported. Wasn't eventually considered. Shanto has agreed to captain the team. There was again a lot of conversation around that. He didn't want to captain the team in any of the formats, but has been convinced to continue at least in this format. Liton Das misses out, so some experience missing out there, but had been in terrible form, so understandable. Now we can potentially move on to the New Zealand team. Santner leading the side. What really stands out for you as far as New Zealand are concerned?
I mean, so the first thing that stands out to me is, and this is what I was saying to you earlier on about the best balance for this side and how it might not just be about pace. I mean, I look at New Zealand's team and I see a lot of players that can, not a lot of all-rounders, but I mean, I consider players like Bracewell, Satner, even Ratchin. These are all people that can contribute in lots of Daryl Mitchell can contribute in lots of different ways. Sometimes it can be a positive. Sometimes I think that, and throw Glenn Phillips in there as well. I see a team with a lot of all-rounders in there, or certain, not bits and pieces cricketers, that would be disrespectful, but can contribute in an all-round way. What I don't know, because everyone keeps saying about New Zealand, how they're an aging side and so on and so forth. We saw in their last tournament, which was the T20 World Cup, that they'd gone one tournament too long with certain players.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a bit of freshening up there. Nathan Smith's there, who I've seen a bit of in England. I don't know how to call it, Megha, because I don't know if this will also be the curse of going one tournament too long as well. Do you see what I mean? I don't. New Zealand's a bit of a kind of question mark, because they're clearly in somewhat of a rebuilding phase without necessarily the players to rebuild with. So they're still relying on a lot of those names are just familiar names: Lockie Ferguson, Devon Conway, Glenn Phillips, Kane Williamson, etc. All the wrong side, not the wrong side. Mitchell Satner, don't want to call it the wrong side of 30, but all aging. And we've always had that kind of stereotype of, oh yeah, New Zealand, they always do well at tournaments. They didn't at the T20 World Cup. So which New Zealand are we going to get?
They boasted of uncanny consistency for the longest time, and then the T20 World Cup came, because otherwise you'd see them at least in top 4 in every tournament. But they have probably injected some new names into the squad, which is refreshing. And one tournament too many, I reckon that would have been very relevant for the T20 World Cup, and that reflected in their performances as well. But maybe in the ODI format, probably it is fair enough. Also, they do not have as big a talent pool as, say, other teams, because of the amount of, because obviously the number of players to choose from, the demography and all of those things factored in. So maybe in their case, transition would be more gradual than the others, particularly the big 3. Maybe we can move on now to the other squads. England have already declared their squad. It's Joss Butler. Afghanistan features at the top over here. So let's go chronologically. Now, Rashid Khan has had injury issues. He looks fit at the moment. Atal was brilliant in the series against Zimbabwe. Rahmat Shah, particularly in tests, was scoring big. How does this team look for you? It's the last tournament for Mohammad Nabi. He'd be signing off from the ODI format after this.
So this is gonna be my big hot take for this tournament. If Afghanistan can bat, they can go very far in this tournament. That's what. Oh, that's probably not even a hot take. That's all I'm willing to say. If they can put runs up, I think Afghanistan are the dark horse in the tournament to be able to defeat, because Afghanistan will never be considered favourites for anything.
Yeah.
Not yet, anyways, in cricket. But they're the one team in this World Cup where if you didn't get enough runs against, and when I say the one team, I mean the one quote unquote weaker side or so-called perceived smaller side in this World Cup, where you would think we might slip over that, we might slip on them here. This could be a potential banana skin. I think all of the bigger sides look at Afghanistan as the banana skin side.
Hmm.
And where if you even drop your levels by 5%, I think Afghanistan would turn most teams over. So they're the ones I expect to cause the biggest shocks, if they're even shocks anymore. They're the ones I expect to do it.
And they've grown from strength to strength. The ODI World Cup did really well. At one point, looked like they were contending for the semis until that jolt against Australia, and then T20 World Cup, of course, made it to the semis. One common theme that we saw during that T20 World Cup was top order would really contribute, particularly the openers, but the middle order was fairly fragile. So
Mm.
that's one area that they would want addressed. Now, England, two horrible title defenses. And after that, obviously, there was a lot of soul searching, brainstorming. There were some resignations as well. Now, it's very important, obviously, for England to pull up their socks. They do not contend, looks like they are not interested in a World Test Championship finals. So, are nowhere near contention for most of the year. It's not just now. Weren't in contention for most of the year. Now, England, how important this World Cup is for them. And now with Brendan McCullum taking over, what sort of message do you see coming out from the England side? And
So
Root is back.
I put England. I think I put England in the same bracket as India, in so much as I feel like England need a strong tournament.
Hmm.
And I like the look of their squad. I mean, we know what McCullum's trying to do. You look at players like Butler, Jacob Bethel,
Yeah.
Harry Brook, Ben Duckett, Liam Livingston, or you look at those players, even Jamie Smith. You look at Phil Salters. You look at those players, and you know if it comes off, England win. I think
Yeah.
it's just obvious. Like if it comes off and they actually play the brand of cricket they like to play, they will win the match. So I'm not going to call England a dark horse because they're England, but I do think that if it clicks, they are probably the hardest team on paper to stop from a batting perspective. But I just like to say, I just think they need a strong tournament. I feel like England there's been a lot of rhetoric around the England side, but when you actually look at their record in formats of cricket, it's not been that good.
Yeah. Stellar.
So I
Yeah.
feel like they need a strong tournament to make a statement.
Although it's a cliche, but which England team would stand up is more relevant than, say, in case of other teams. Now, Australia, Pat Cummins, he has led them to so many trophies. We've lost count of that. We're not really sure about what his niggle is like at the moment. Meanwhile, obviously, you have got a lot of experience in there. Travis Head, ICC knockouts is a different Travis Head that puts his hand up, and otherwise as well has been in a great run of form. So overall, Australian side, a lot of experience, have this tendency of doing really well at the ICC events, rising to the occasion, and the squad does look well rounded as well.
Yeah, and Australia's the one that I think needs the least analysis, because of all the teams in the tournament, Australia are the one that I think everybody would agree. Everyone just knows their role. That does. I am not saying for any stretch of the imagination, Megha, that means they're going to win. I'm not. That's not my point at all. But their setup is. They're the ones going into the tournament with no question marks. If you see what I mean, every single they're on form. They've just won the Border Gavaskar. They're on a high. They won the World Cup. They won the 50 over World Cup. Yes, there may be question marks about if this is their is it still one of their best? If it's their best format of cricket, there could be question marks about that. But when I look
Hmm.
at their squad, I don't doubt that every single player knows the role they're expected to play in this tournament.
Yeah.
So as usual with Australia, they will go into the tournament as one of the favourites, and if they don't win it, it will be a shock when they get knocked out. But the one thing we can guarantee, Megha, is they expect to win the tournament. If you see what I mean, they're the one team that you're like,
Hmm.
yeah, they expect to win. Um,
Hmm.
and, uh, and that
No
takes you a
matter
long
how
way.
they start.
Yeah, no matter what goes on, they
Yeah.
have the self-confidence to be like, yeah, we expect to at least be getting into the final four, if not the final.
That's what pedigree does. Now,
Mm.
South Africa, on the other side of the spectrum, when we talk about pedigree, Bavuma obviously leading the side, he would be high on confidence. South African team overall would be high on confidence, albeit different formats. But T20 World Cup made to the finals, are in the finals of the WTC. Now, this is, although they're just in the finals, they have not yet lifted a trophy, but it still should mean a world to their confidence, because even this was something that they'd been deprived of for the longest time. They'd get knocked out in the knockouts. So from here on, obviously it's about building on that confidence, and they've got the resources. Klaasen back in form, that's so important for them, and we've seen the amount of destruction that he can cause when on song. And they obviously also have a lot of experience there in Miller, Makram, and obviously Rabada too. So what does South African squad look like to you?
I love this squad. I really like the South African team. I think the biggest thing about South Africa, which you can't explain by looking at some names, is the culture that Shukra Conrad has
Yeah.
developed for their squad. Everybody is buying into a mission. You know that with the South African team. It's one of the biggest reasons why they got to the World Cup to the World Test Championship final. They know what they're about. They know what they're working towards. The only question mark, so I have no issue with
Hmm.
the balance of the South African side. I think we know those players. I feel like I've seen that side many, many times. So I don't doubt everybody's role within that side. The only question mark I've got about South Africa is just what their focus is. How much does the mission of winning the World Test Championship impact on a tournament that's probably come at a time when it's not their major focus?
Hmm.
If you see where I'm coming from. So that's the only question mark. But maybe, Megha, that allows them to play freely, if you
Yeah.
get where I'm coming from, without pressure on their shoulders. They've almost done the thing that was the pressure, which is getting to the World Test Championship final. So maybe this will be one of the freest South African sides we see in terms of how they approach the tournament.
And it's remarkable how Rob Walter and Shukri Conrad are working in sync with regards to the personnel available as well. And again, Bavuma is not featuring in SA20, nor is the Aussie, but obviously they'd not be short of match time. And they have obviously that experience to bank upon overall as a squad, and they also feature in a tri series ahead of the Champions Trophy, would get to be very familiar with the conditions. Maybe second ODI onwards, they'd have second game onwards, they'd have their full squad at their disposal. I think we are in a position to conclude. We've primarily covered every team that has already declared their squads. Pakistan, maybe closing thought on Pakistan. Home conditions, how do you see them thriving? Which players do you see particularly responding to the challenge?
I just think for Pakistan, it's clear for me what the issue will be. Irrespective of who they end up picking, the biggest thing for Pakistan will be the pressure on them or the pressure
Yeah.
they put on themselves. And in particular, depending on they're either at an advantage or disadvantage because they currently have a test series that they have to play against West Indies. If they lose that, just say argument's sake, they lost that, the pressure that will be on the side to bounce back in the Champions Trophy will be so
Hmm.
much that could derail them completely. So I think for Pakistan, I can't really fully comment on them till the test series is done, because that has a huge impact on the noise that goes on around them, because it's a home tournament and that can either help you or massively
Hmm.
hinder you.
And probably this is one format where they've shown some form and consistency, having blanked South Africa 3-0 and also having registered a series win against Australia in Australia. Now, on that note, we can conclude this conversation. I'd leave this comment as the closing comment that you can read and respond to in the comment section. Mash only has a smile to furnish in response. Or shall we conclude with the one final question? Mash, your team, the team that you are backing to lift the Champions Trophy. Is it the screen freeze, or is Mash taking time to respond to that? What an appropriate time for the screen to freeze. That's really unfair. I'm assuming Mash would say Australia, considering how he built up Australia. Probably you can let us know in the comments section which team you think Mash would back to lift the Champions Trophy and which team are you backing to lift the Champions Trophy. Thank you so much for joining.
Remember to support us by subscribing and sharing, but also signing up at Cricket8.com, where live scorecards cover 8,000 matches a year with advanced visual details that tell you who is actually in front in the game.